What's up, fellow puppets? Today we're talking about Pinocchio, Disney's newest live-action remake. And you know, I don't exactly keep up with Disney news, and for some reason I thought Disney was finally out of this era. With their last actual dumpster fire remake, Mulan, being in 2020, and great movies like Encanto releasing since, I thought, my god, it's finally over. The Disney remake era is over. I was a naive fool, a complete utter fool, because now this Pinocchio movie has entered our lives, and I really wish it didn't. This might be the biggest pile of horse crap I've seen in a really long time, which is fitting considering this is literally a shot in the movie. And you know what? I wouldn't have such an issue with this thing being actual garbage if I knew how bad it was gonna be. Pretty much everyone who watches this movie is met with immense disappointment. So let's talk about why it's just so bad. There are three main categories for this movie being awful that I'm gonna talk about. Category 1 is everything to do with the animation and visuals of the film. Category 2 is everything to do with the plot and writing of the film. And Category 3 is just specific scenes that make you want to stop watching the movie then and there. Before we get into the categories, let's just summarize the entire plot of the movie really quickly, so that way everything makes sense. Movie starts, there's Geppetto, lonely carver, toy maker, clock maker, whatever maker. He makes things, he has a workshop. He wants a boy, a real boy. So he goes and makes Pinocchio, a little puppet. Geppetto makes a wish, his wish is granted, and Pinocchio comes to life. A magic fairy comes down to Pinocchio and sorts him straight because when he first came to life, he wasn't talking properly. Pinocchio's first wish, once he gains sentience, is that he wants to be a real boy. He wants to be a real boy more than anything, and the fairy tells him he can be one as long as he is good. There's Jiminy Cricket, a cricket who just wandered into the workshop that night, who the fairy appoints to be Pinocchio's conscience, to tell him what's right and what's wrong, until Pinocchio can develop his own conscience to guide him. Geppetto finds out Pinocchio came to life and now is basically raising him like family. He goes to send Pinocchio off to school, and this is where things get messy. Pinocchio on his way to school gets held up by a fox and a cat who want to exploit him. They tell Pinocchio that he can become famous and that he doesn't need school, but Pinocchio wants to go to school anyway. He goes to school, but then he gets kicked out because they don't want a puppet sitting in their human school. The fox and cat track Pinocchio down at the school again, and this time they are successful at getting him to follow them. They bring him to the one and only Stromboli, a showman who will do anything to make $1 off of his puppeteer shows. Here, Pinocchio meets a girl named Fabiana, a new character to this adaptation, and she's pretty much just there to show him kindness. She has a little bit of an arc. No one really cares about it because her impact on the story is not significant, but she had a dream of being a ballerina, but because of her leg injury, her dreams kind of got cut short, so now she expresses herself through puppeteering. Pinocchio performs at Stromboli's show, and Pinocchio's performance is so profitable for Stromboli that he doesn't want to let Pinocchio go, so he locks him in a cage. Jiminy Cricket got held up and trapped under a jar earlier in the film, but breaks free and comes to Pinocchio's rescue at this part. Jiminy and Pinocchio are talking, and Pinocchio's nose starts growing because he's lying. But here's something, Pinocchio isn't really lying at this part. One of the lies he apparently told was that he wanted to go to school. But the thing is, he actually did want to go to school. He did go to school. He abandoned the foxes first time around and carried on his way to class. So I don't understand how this is a lie because he literally did want to go to school. So this part literally makes no sense, but let's continue. Pinocchio and Jiminy realize that his growing nose can help Pinocchio escape by letting Jiminy reach a key that's on the wall. So Pinocchio keeps lying until they grab the key. He's able to make his nose go back down to normal by apologizing to Jiminy. While the two of them are escaping and running away from Stromboli's cart, Jiminy gets swept away and Pinocchio accidentally gets taken to Pleasure Island. Pleasure Island is an island mischievous kids go to where they're free of adults, free of rules or any limitations, and can do literally whatever they want. In the original Pinocchio, this included breaking a nice house, roughhousing, smoking, etc. And in this version, the breaking a nice house part is still intact, but a lot of the other things got changed to drinking root beer, eating candy, and smashing clocks. So the kids go crazy here. Pinocchio meets a kid, Lampwick, who basically tries getting Pinocchio to come along with him and partake in all the bad stuff. Jiminy arrives at the island and notices something weird is going on because he doesn't see any kids, just donkeys being hauled away by scary, shadowy figures. Meanwhile, Pinocchio and Lampwick are playing pool while drinking root beer. In the original, they were still playing pool, but they were smoking cigars. So that scene definitely felt different. Like, it felt really out of place for kids to be doing that. However, in this movie, it doesn't really feel like they're doing anything that bad. Lampwick is telling Pinocchio to be bad, and Pinocchio pretty much just says no. Lampwick starts turning into a donkey against his will in sheer terror. He loses his ability to speak, and based on how he acts after becoming a donkey, he may have lost his human sentience too, but that's unclear. Pinocchio also starts turning into a donkey as he sprouts a tail and new donkey ears. Him and Jiminy escape the island before more can happen. After they escape the island, they return to Geppetto's workshop and find out he's not there anymore because he sailed out to sea. So they now go to the shore to find him. While they're on the beach, Fabiana coincidentally rolls by and finds Pinocchio. She tells him good news that Stromboli got arrested and now she's started her own puppet theater. She asks him if he wants to join her, and he declines. He says he has to go find his father. And with this declaration, Pinocchio's donkey ears and tail just clear up in an instant. And this is only a few minutes later in the film after he initially got them. It took so much more work for him to lose them in the original film. They find Geppetto on his boat, and just when he and Pinocchio are about to be reunited, Geppetto gets swallowed up by Monstro, the whale. Oh, sorry, it's not a whale in this movie. It used to be a whale, but in this movie, it's a CGI, monstrous water creature. Because I guess being devoured by a whale just wasn't intimidating enough of an obstacle. No, they had to add tentacles, spikes, and whatnot to it. And my theory for this is that it has to be like this to sell toys or license the creature or something. Because you can't do much with a whale. A literal species can't be copyright protected, but once you make it a different creature entirely, that gives you more to work with. Pinocchio and Geppetto are stuck in the creature for a bit, but then they light a fire inside of it, and it starts opening its mouth due to irritation, leaving them room to escape. Once out of the whale, Pinocchio starts flailing his limbs super fast, trying to get them back to land and safety. Monstro is now chasing them, but they do arrive on land, and they are safe. And then the movie abruptly ends by telling the viewers, Pinocchio may have become a real boy, or maybe he didn't? Who cares? What does it matter? It's not like this very ending is important in any way to the overall moral and value to the story. Here's a shot of them walking into the light. Alright, now on to the good stuff, and by good stuff, I mean horrible stuff. Let's talk about why this remake sucks so bad. While it may make sense for me to pick apart the story first, I really think I just gotta talk about the animation and CGI for this movie because it was so bad that it absolutely has to be the first thing that we start with. I mean, it literally was 20 years behind in some parts. A Disney movie literally looked like it was 20 years behind with its graphics at some moments. And I mean, why even make a live-action, updated remake, nearly shot-for-shot version of a movie if you can't even have it reflect the actual current potential of the medium you're telling the story in? Like, if you're gonna make a live-action remake, at least have the graphics look current. At least let them show the true potential of CGI. The original Pinocchio was an animation marvel in its time. It was stunning. It was impressive. But this remake is a failure for its time. So let's just talk about some parts where the animation was horrifically bad. The entire Pleasure Island sequence was a dumpster fire. Right away when the kids are in their carts on the way to the island, there's a bunch of weird stuff going on. First of all, from the front-facing shots, these kids are real. They're actors lured behind the front row of this cart. But in the other angles of this cart, these kids are 3D animated models. And you can really tell because this literally reminds me of the 2004 Polar Express movie. Look at this is so bad. 13-year-old source filmmaker animators run circles around this, which, you know, shouldn't really be a thing since this is a Disney movie. This kid's hand isn't even properly motion tracked to the railing it's holding onto. The kids are doing quick animation loops and it all looks very amateur. I mean, these kids aren't in the background either. They are right in your face. They thought this shot was good enough for people to look at. And sure, maybe 20 years ago it was, but it's 2022. The entire CGI of Pleasure Island doesn't look properly integrated with any of the actors. You can tell they are not physically occupying that space. Some parts of this scene literally look like video game graphics, though I'd say that applies to a lot of other parts of the movie as well. When they're in the clock smashing area, there are a lot of issues. First of all, again, people aren't even properly anchored in place. You can see them and other objects glide across the floor unnaturally at parts. The debris from the clocks being smashed literally looks like video game graphics, and the kids don't look like they're part of the scene at all. Its obvious direction didn't tell them anything except for the literal motion they should be doing. They told them to swing their hammers and bats, but that's it. These kids are supposed to be mischievous, having fun, wreaking havoc on this place, and instead, half of them are straight-faced and look like they're using no effort to swing these hammers, like they aren't feeling the impact of the clock shattering, and importantly, they aren't feeling the emotional satisfaction of destroying things in an unhinged way. So to sum it up, the Pleasure Island scene is hot garbage, and this is because it's a scene that expresses the #1 issue with graphics in this movie. It is like the main issue in this movie put on steroids. It's that there seems to be no cohesion between the visuals in this movie. Every single layer of CGI, actor, and object stick out independently and don't mix together in the scenes at all. Like, let's use a cake as an example. You put all the ingredients in, you do some cooking, and then voila, you have a cake. At least you should have a cake. All the ingredients are in there, but you're looking at a cake. That's what you see. What Pinocchio did was it tried making a cake, but instead you look at this thing and you just see some eggs, flour, and a whisk in a bowl. You can see exactly when something in the shot is out of place, when it's not real, and when its movement got messed up. In good movies, you don't notice it. In good movies, you shouldn't know every single layer that went into each shot and exactly how everything was done. But in this one, it looks so painfully amateur. In the Pleasure Island scene, Lampwick is holding a root beer mug that's CGI. It didn't need to be, but it is animated for some reason. You can see it clip into his fingers and float around. His hand isn't even properly wrapped around the handle. Here, when Geppetto is spinning Pinocchio in his hands, it's also very obvious that he's not holding anything. Pinocchio slightly bounces around between his fingers, not really colliding with anything or showing that he's being held. Now, another glaring issue that makes this movie look graphically disjointed is the fact that all these animalistic characters are rendered in a realism style. The scenery is made to look realistic, and there are real human actors occupying these spaces. But Pinocchio is heavily stylized and looks out of place. I don't mind Pinocchio looking cartoony. I'd rather him look cartoony than some hyper-realistic marionette, because that would be deeply terrifying. I don't want them to go there. Him being stylized in this way, I think, is good. But since he's stylized, I feel like they should have extended that over to some of the other characters, like the fox. Because, oh boy, can I just say, he's horrible. He is awful. Maybe screenshots don't do him a justice with his creepiness. It's more so when he talks, his whole character becomes unsettling, because they lip-synced an actual fox mouth to human words.
On your way to lecture at the Science Academy?
No.
Famous!
I'm not a fan, I don't like it. Now, I'm not saying they should have made him Nick Wilde or anything, but if they maybe stylized him more so in that direction instead of this direction, this would have been more enjoyable. The way they went with the realistic animal style in this movie made the donkey transformation scene visually horrifying. Now, let me just say right now, conceptually, I think this scene is terrifying. It always disturbed me in the original Pinocchio, the idea of being forcefully transformed into a donkey against your will. Terrible. Lampwick's last words being him crying out for his mom before his speech was taken from him forever is awful. All the kids who turned into donkeys did not deserve a punishment so cruel. And get this, they weren't freed. They were all sold off to mining corporations or something to do labor as donkeys for the rest of their lives. And another thing is, I don't know if these kids lost their sentience and gained a donkey mind, or if they kept their human mind while being donkeys, but both possibilities are horrifying, because on one end, if they lost their human intelligence and sentience, it's deeply tragic and is kind of the same thing that goes on in zombie movies. Kind of. It's why a lot of people would rather die by their own hand than turn into this horrible creature they are not. It seems like a fate worse than death. And if the kids kept their human sentience, it's still awful because now they have to literally watch the rest of their lives unfold as a donkey, unable to do anything, unable to see their family ever again. It's dark. But you know what? At least in the original Pinocchio, it was animated. At least there was that. At least you didn't have Lampwick turning into this. This made it so much worse. I have two final things to say about the animation in this film. The way they animated puppet strings sucked. Like everything else in this film, the strings didn't interact with puppets right at all. They looked separate. And sadly, this is a movie about puppets. So, 2. Fabiana's puppet is incredibly weird because she's supposed to be a simple puppet with no magic. Literally just a puppet. But somehow she has functioning eyes that move independently of anything. Like her eyes have free will. It's weird, it doesn't make any sense. And I know this is a movie about a puppet coming to life, so it doesn't need to be realistic, but it's just a really weird choice because again, she's supposed to just be a simple puppet. Now it's time to talk about how this movie butchered the story of Pinocchio. Now, the number one issue I have with it is that it fails to actually deliver the point of what the original Pinocchio film was trying to say. It failed to actually capture the heart of the original. In the original, Pinocchio made mistakes. He went along with temptation and seriously messed up at some points. But in the remake, he's a goody two-shoes from the beginning all the way to the end, which makes me wonder about a few things, like why was he even appointed a conscience in the first place if he clearly shows that he does have one? Pinocchio is supposed to make mistakes. It's so that way in the end he can become a real boy, and the movie can basically say, you can mess up, you can make tons of mistakes along the way, but it's never too late for you to get on the right track. Well, Pinocchio never really got off the right track. He never left it. He was brought to Pleasure Island on accident and didn't partake in any of the bad things the other kids were doing. He literally spoke out against it. And he was mostly just an observer. I mean, he drank root beer, but are we really gonna count that? Are we really gonna say that that's bad child behavior? Is that really the hill you wanna die on, Disney? That kids drinking root beer is apparently a good replacement for kids smoking cigars? That they're equally as bad, really? The decision to replace these grown-up substances with candy and normal kid things is ridiculous, and it just punishes kids for having basic wants. And this makes the donkey punishment seem way more cruel, because these boys and girls weren't even trying to be mature by messing with adult vices. They were literally just trying to be kids. Now, going with the butchering of the Pinocchio message mentioned earlier, the ending of this film makes things worse, because it does not say whether or not Pinocchio became a real boy, whether or not he was actually good enough to become one. It's weird, because obviously this Pinocchio was good enough to have his wish granted. He was obviously good enough to be a real boy. But instead, the movie tries to pull some lazy ass, maybe the real boy was inside us all along. Who cares if I'm made of wood? I am good. And that is real enough for me. Like, no, it's cheesy. No one cares. You don't need to try to sound like some deep philosophy professor. That reputation went out the window the second you stuck Pinocchio's nose in horse crap. Yeah, that's a scene that happens. He just bends down on the street and takes a solid blinding whiff of this stuff, full on contracting pink eye from this thing. This is what rock bottom looks like. Now, with the story and writing in this film being bad, I need to talk about two characters, the fairy and Lampwick, because the writers fumbled them so hard. So first of all, with the fairy in the original Pinocchio, she appears 3 times throughout the movie, guiding Pinocchio along and helping him. In this version, she appears once at the beginning and then flies off, never to be seen again. Now with Lampwick, I think the creators gave him way too many cheesy lines, and his connection to Pinocchio didn't feel legitimate at all. Now Pinocchio and Lampwick didn't have a genuine friendship or anything in the original either, but they definitely were interacting. They had some sort of chemistry. But in this movie, it literally doesn't even feel like these two are interacting with each other at all. They're in the same scenes, but they don't actually feel like they're occupying the same space, connecting with each other. There's no chemistry at all. And I don't think it's the fault of the kid playing him. I don't. I think it's everything to do with the script and direction. Now lastly, this movie has a couple of what the hell moments where you just gotta sit back and ask, why? I covered one of those moments earlier, the Pinocchio bending down to sniff horse crap, but the second moments is that there are 2 extended sequences in Geppetto's shop where there are clocks going off, and all of these clocks that are featured and shoved right in your face are Disney movie references, blatant Disney references. And these don't count as Easter eggs because they are right in your face, and this entire montage of references lasts multiple seconds. It goes on for way too long. It's not an Easter egg, it is a feature of the film. And a lot of these movie references don't even make any sense for the setting because Pinocchio assumedly takes place in the 1800s, while this Woody clock should not even be a thing until the cuff around the 90s and 2000s. It's out of place, and all of these clocks are so obviously in your face so they can shove the brand down your throat. Buy our product. I think we get it. You're Disney. Despite how much they try shoving their brand in your face in this movie, this would be the last project I would try to be stamping ownership on if I was Disney. I would actually pay for some other company to take this off my hands and remove it from my portfolio. Now, to bring this video to a close, that movie sucked majorly. But what thoughts do you have on it? Let me know in the comments down below. And also, if you have any ideas for stuff you want me to cover in future videos, let me know because I'll take a look. If you want to check out my social media, second channel, or merch, I got links down in the description below. Thank you all for watching and have a great rest of your day.